Give us free. Give us free. Give us free.
Your Honor, please instruct the defendant that he cannot disrupt these proceedings with such outbursts.
Give us free.
If we are to have any semblance of order in this
Give us
Mod Hotep, and welcome my conscious and unconscious family and peeps. This is the African Village Community Podcast, and I am truly your host of the show, JC, aka Afro Black, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut, without any fear, as I use my mic as a spear to chucka you with liberated truth. I am your host and African soldier in the struggle. My purpose and mission for this show is first to inform, enlighten, and engage. And you all know what I mean by engage. I want to engage with all those who claim they know the truth. All truth seekers and conscious family, I welcome you. This show is dedicated to all our ancient ancestors and to all those who have carried the mantle of truth. To every person with the ability to throw off the chains of comfortable habit and unwarranted assumption and move in a new, liberated direction that is guided by truth and observational evidence. No matter where that direction may lead you, my main objective and purpose here is freedom, mind, soul, and spirit. That being said, welcome to the African Village Community Podcast, and much love from our great universal African goddess and mother of all, living here and above. Ashe and Ashe.
In the house.
Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people. Aboriginal means the original inhabitant of a land from the earliest times. The ancient mound builders have built and designed the pyramids right here, not just by the Nile, contrary to popular belief and denial. Pyramids and huge hieroglyphics and pictographs on the ground are all mounds found around the Americas, North, Central, and South, even Venus and Mars. That is documented fact that emanates from my mouth. So who exactly were these aboriginals here, whose ancient evidence of residency is hesitantly mentioned in this hemisphere? Were they the stereotypical Native American so-called Red Indians? Well then, let's be clear, ask any of their tribes if they're sincere. They'll tell ya those mounds predate their origins. Our past was erased and replaced with lies. Our achievements and identity plagiarized. We got amnesia of who we are, but we go way back further than the seats in your car. Aboriginal people, 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 Aboriginal people.
Hey, this is JC, aka for Black, and I am here with you for another delicious Black Sunday, dropping nothing but the raw and the uncut here on the Black Village Community Podcast. And I am here with you today. I missed last week. I wasn't here last week. I had some issues with my computer, some serious issues with my computer. I'm talking about some virus hacking type stuff that hit my computer and kind of knocked me out of the box, so I couldn't do a show last week. But you know what? I am back and I am black here on the Black Village Community Podcast, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut to my conscious and unconscious community, giving you nothing but the raw and uncut truth. And today's podcast is titled, if anybody's seen the events page, but let me let you know what the title is. If you haven't seen the events page on Google, the biggest lies ever told to Black Americans. Again, podcast topic is the biggest lies ever told to Black Americans, subtitled about our identity, DNA, and the African slave trade. So today is going to be a good show. I got some information I want to share, articles I want to read, some audio casts I want to play to help my people recognize and to accept the fact that we are not African Americans, but we are Black Native Americans. Okay? And I'm talking about those of us who have slave history going all the way back to the slave history in this country. I'm not talking about those who've immigrated over here, those Africans who have immigrated over here to America. I'm talking about those like myself who know no Africans in my family. I don't know of any Africans in my family, but I do know Native Americans in my family. I do know those in my family, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and so forth, who are of Native American heritage. And so I'm going to talk about that information, how that information was hidden from us, how that culture was stolen from us, and how these white devils continue to perpetuate a lie to the Black American population. So let me change my theme music so we can have a little bit something more easy to vibrate to. There we go. I'm pretty sure you guys have heard this over and over again. Brother J. Bach, Aboriginal people. I will continue to play Brother J. Bach in reference to my podcast titles, which is in reference to Black and Native American heritage, as I talk about our connection to our Native American peoples, as well as you can chime in. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a bit of your conscious time to join me and my queen here on the Black Village. Just chime in at 855-445-9340. You can also chime in at 857-232-0155, and you need the conference code to get through the conference door, which is 947595. And let me also let those know who use my number to chime in. It doesn't, the company which I use my toll-free number, we don't charge you nothing. So if you're being charged for calling in on my show, that has everything to do with your telephone company or your cell phone service that's charging you any type of toll calls, because I don't charge you a dime to call in on my show. It's toll free. So I got that out of the way. And so I am not here reverberating on this subject matter alone. I got my queen with me to reverberate with me on this subject matter. Who want to holler at the community queen?
Hello, my beautiful people.
And so we're gonna start this subject matter off. As I said, the podcast title is The Biggest Lies Ever Told to Black Americans. We've been lied to, not about a whole host of things, but the subject matter that I'm focusing on, which is Black and Native American heritage, that's the biggest lie that we've been told about our identity. Would you agree, Queen?
Absolutely.
We've been told that we're African American. And, you got most black folks that want to hold on to that subject title. I'm not sure if a lot of black people even remember when that argument or that debate came into play in the early 80s, about who are we, what are we, what should we be called? Should we be how we were called Negroes when we were, when our ancestors were enslaved here, and then we went from Negroes to being called colored and to being called blacks, and for some reason, educated house Negroes and ignorant black people just thought it was okay to accept the title that the white devil had given us, which was titled African American. Why? Because they had perpetuated through their lying history that they continue to write, as they have said in the past, it's the conqueror who writes history. You know, they perpetuate it through the media. They perpetuate it through film footage and through all types of technologies that we are African, are of African descent. And the reason why is because there's a whole over 100 years of enslavement that's been omitted from history. Again, there is a whole over 100 years of enslavement that has been omitted from history. And that enslavement was not African enslavement. That enslavement was Native American enslavement. And they perpetuated the lies. So let me go through this list of lies that these white devils have perpetuated to us. And then I want to hear what my queen has to say about this, because see, a lot of this information she's not privy to, because she's a hard-working queen who works hard for her family. So I do all the research for my show, but she joins me on the show and reverberates with me because she is a very intelligent, wise, intuitive woman. So starting with lie number one, what we've been told: Black Americans are African Americans. That's the number one lie. Okay. And before I go to the second lie, let me reverberate on that lie. As I've told a lot of people over the internet, as I've told a lot of people in my family, for you to be considered an African American legally, to be a legal citizen with the title African American, you would have to have immigrated over here to America from Africa and go through the legal process of becoming an American. Then you are an African American. But remember, you've immigrated from Africa. That means you literally have come from Africa, your family is from Africa, and you've immigrated here. Or, like Brother Barack Obama, the House Negro president of ours, you have to have at least one or two parents, both of your parents, who are African, who've immigrated to America and had a child on American soil. Now that child is considered an African American through their parents, because one or both of their parents are African who've immigrated here and became Americans. But that's not so with black folks in America who have slave history in this country. Black folks like myself and in my family and the many of black people in this country who have slave history in this country are not African Americans. But for one thing, I'm not from Africa. Nobody in my family is from Africa. Nobody in my family have immigrated here from Africa. So that means that we are native to America. So just on a legal status, you cannot lay claim to something that's not true. Okay? Lie number two. Africans are predominantly the ancestors of Black Americans. Another lie, a genetic lie and a historical lie. Okay, and that will be dealt with more as I do the podcast with the information I'm going to share. Okay, lie number three: Black indigenous Indians never existed, or there were no such tribes. Another lie. Most black folks don't know that the original indigenous aboriginal people of this country looked no different than any other black American in this country. Do your research, people. If you want to know some of the black tribes, I'll tell you. The Yamasi, which my wife have heard me say over and over again. But that's one of my favorite tribes, and the reason why the Yamasi, Yamasee, the Yamasi are one of my favorite black Native American tribes, is because they gave the white men serious hell during the War of 1715. Go look it up, people. Another black indigenous tribe, the Califians of California, the Natchez, of Mississippi, a Mississippi tribe called the Natchez. The list goes on, people. Do your research. You feel me? Stop letting these white devils lie to you about our history and our heritage and our connection to the native people of this country. The fourth lie, that DNA testing will prove native ancestry. Like most black folks are doing, they depending on these white devils to tell us who we are. Ancestry.com, white devils. Okay? Familytree.com, white devils. I'm calling them white devils because they're lying to my people. 23andMe,
white devils again. And any other DNA company or corporation in this company, they're a bunch of fucking white devils. I'm going to give it to you raw and uncut just like that because it pisses me off because I've heard the stories and my people getting these DNA tests coming back tomorrow. They're 80% African mandate. They're 72% Zimbabwean and all this crap. That's going to be broken up in this show. I got information. I'll talk more about that as the show go on. I got an audio cast. A very important audio cast I want to play to the conscious community on the DNA subject. The fifth lie, that Native Indian tribes died off due to war and disease. Another huge Adolf Hitler big Mein Kampf lie. Raw and uncut. Isn't that true, Queen? Would you agree?
Yeah, it is. That's like a huge lie in itself.
That's a huge lie. And the sad thing about it is this. The people who embrace these lies more than anybody in the world are people in America. Because people outside of America, England, most of all of Europe, even Africa, they know more about us than we know about us. I got an audio cast. I'm going to prove that. Okay? The sixth lie that's been told to us. Slave ships brought millions of enslaved Africans to America. Another embedded, psychological, huge white lie. Not small white lie. Huge, massive white lie. And last but least, the seventh lie I want to bring to the conscious community. Back to Africa, brainwashing propaganda sold as truth. Another lie. Now, I want you to know there was a brother on Google who got at me saying, and laughed at me. He laughed at me. And I can understand why he thought it was funny. You know, I can understand. I take nothing away from his joke or his laughter or his sarcasm, you know, that he was going at me. Ain't no big deal. I take it as it comes. It's all gravy and potatoes. But he was still ignorant of what I was saying. The Back to Africa propaganda, the Back to Africa propaganda has nothing to do with black folks going to Africa. The white devil know that black folks ain't going nowhere. The majority of black people ain't going nowhere. Just look at our economic position in this country. Even though we have more black business people today, more black millionaires today, more black entrepreneurs today, the majority of the black community lives either in or below the poverty line. And when you compare black people in this country to other ethnic groups like the Mexican population or the Asian population, let's not even look at the white population, we're still below them on the economic scale. Even though black women are the highest in graduation from high school to college. You got more black women graduating with degrees, more black women graduating with 4.0s from high school than any race compared to the white race, the Asian race, and the Mexican race. Black women are graduating at high rates. Yet, the white devils are working on that. You know, doing everything they can to suppress and to make it hard for black people to get an education, working hard on our young kids in school to kick them out of class, looking for any reason to suspend them or kick them out of class. So my point being is that these white devils, they don't want us leaving here, even if we wanted to go to Africa. Yet Africa is still not our home. Our home is right here in America. We're at home. This is our home. This is our ancestral home. And these white devils know this as well. Now, to get to some, an article I want to read before I go into any audio cast verifying anything that we're talking about today. And again, if anybody want to join the cast here at the Black Village community, the Black Village, you can join me toll free 855-445-9340, and you can also chime in at 857-232-0155, and don't forget the conference code, which is 947-595. I got an article I want to read, which I found very interesting when I was doing my research, and the article is titled "Stuff White People Do." Queen, can you please read that article?
Alrighty, stuff white people do. The ways of white folks, some white folks, quote by Langston Hughes, claim they have Native American blood. But hear me thinks I can hear you observe what, Englishmen, intermarry with Indians? But I can convince you they are guilty of much more heinous practices, more unjustifiable in the sight of God and man. For many base wretches among amongst us take up with Negro women, by which means the country swarms with mulatto bastards, and these mulattoes, if by 3 generations removed from the black father or mother, may be indulgence of the laws of the country, intermarry with white people, and actually do every day so marry. If instead of this abominable practice, which hath polluted the blood of many amongst us, we had taken Indian wives in the first place, it would have made them some compensation for their lands. We should become rightful heirs to their lands, and should not have smutted our blood. The Reverend Peter Fontaine of Virginia, in a letter to his brother Moses, dated March 30th, 1757.
All right, stop right there. That passage right there proves the devilish mindset of the white devil, with plans on taking the native people's land by intermarrying with their women. The white devil knew that the indigenous Native American, the indigenous Aboriginal people of America were matriarchal by customs, were matriarchal by natural customary practices and traditions. He knew this, and this is the reason why you see this white devil named Reverend Peter Fontaine of Virginia, who made this statement in 1757, date March 30th, who just talked about, I'm gonna read that passage, that second paragraph again. He said, now, if instead this abominable practice, which have polluted the blood of many amongst us, we had taken Indian wives in the first place, it would have made them some compensation for their lands. We should become rightful heirs of their lands and should not have smutted our blood. Basically, what he's saying is that, for one thing, we got to first recognize the white devil had no problem marrying lighter skinned native people. He didn't want to marry with the dark skinned natives, the natives that looked to him like they were from Africa, which is the indigenous Aboriginal people of this country. White devil knew that. And so he had already, just by reading this paragraph by this this Reverend Pimp, Christian preacher, Peter Fontaine, you can see the plan, and this is dated 1757, that it was already in the process of works in their mind how to take the land from the people by marrying their women and becoming chiefs on their boards and tribes and being able to manipulate and take the land. So you had them taking it by force and war, and you had them also taking it by manipulation, by breeding with the women. They were already raping the women and killing the women through war. Now these devils are talking about doing it through friendship, of marrying their wives. And this process is seen even today in America, where you got these blue-eyed, blonde-haired white devils claiming that they're Native American. Yet they tell a black man or a black woman who are the actual image and descendant of the indigenous people of this country, they'll tell us that we're not Indian. And then tell us in a minute, you prove it. Because they've already manipulated documentation. And I got proof of that as well. Continue, Queen, please. This article is very good.
There's long been a belief among the many family members on my father's side that my father's grandmother was part Indian. From what I've gathered, such claims are common in white families in the United States. White claims about what may be just as likely being part black are almost non-existent. I would like to know what percentage of Americans who self-identify as white contain non-white blood. But reading around on the topic tells me that any particular statistics are not universally accepted by genealogical and DNA experts. Also, since so many people who did have African or Native blood and could pass for white did so, only DNA tests for a large percent of white Americans could provide reliable percentage. But even then, the tests themselves aren't necessarily reliable. The quote-unquote Native American results, for example, could be confused with Asian ancestry given the geographic origins of Native Americans. According to the Guardian article by Paul Harris on the increasing popularity of genetic testing, 1/3 of white Americans, according to some tests, will possess between 2 and 20% African genes. The majority of black Americans have some European ancestors. I've yet to find informed estimates of white Americans with Native American genes. Please tell us in a comment if you know any. Harris points out that Native Americans are growing in numbers not because of high birth rate, but because many Americans are discovering unknown Native ancestors written in their DNA. I doubt that some discovery about African American blood is causing that recorded population to increase, given the regularity with which white Americans impregnate slaves in order, among other reasons, to increase their property, and then go on, in some cases, to sell their own children. And again, given the ability of many light-skinned black Americans to pass into white society. Given these and other factors, I would think that DNA tests for whites probably turn up more African American than Native American blood. And yet, few white people who found black blood probably go on to proclaim their black ancestry, while many who find Native American blood do go on to proclaim their black ancestry.
Oh, continue, please.
I should also note that white people in the United States are not the only ones who hope to find Native American ancestry. Many African Americans seek it as well, and significant interaction between the two groups means that some find it. And many Latina Americans, of course, don't have to search for at all to find their Native American roots. Some of the white Americans who take DNA tests or search census and birth records for Native American ancestry do so in the hopes of claiming financial benefits. As Harris writes, Native Americans often complain they are swamped by American Indian princess syndrome because every white person wants Native DNA in their past. In a world of minority grants, scholarships, and Indian gambling rights, any debate over DNA and race could easily also become an argument over resources. Some of these questing white Americans just want to know who they are. This strikes me as a dubious quest. Would finding some Native American or black blood really make a person who was raised white, looks white, and gets taken and treated as white any more black or Indian? It is also clear that most white people looking for Native American ancestry are hoping to establish a more romanticized connection to Indianness, a connection based in and stuck in the past much more so than the present. These are the white searchers, sometimes called pretendians, who hope to fill up a certain emptiness in their bleached-out, whitened identity, but want little part of actual ongoing Native American struggles. Many of them will never go to a reservation to experience the results of white genocidal practices, even if they do find Native American blood in their DNA. They're rarely willing to fight for treaty rights, nor help with such contemporary problems as compulsory sterilization or substance abuse. Indeed, they're rarely willing to even acknowledge these problems, or do much of anything else that goes beyond vague, sentimental ideas of supposedly authentic Indianness. So why do a lot of white people cherish the possibility of Native American blood so much more than that of African American blood, even when the latter may well be more likely part of their background? I think, as with the cherished Native American possibility, their distaste and sometimes even disgust for the possibility of black ancestors is based on received notions from the past, but also on those of the present. Ever since slavery in the U.S. was limited to black people in order to divide them from working white people, they've been the most despised racial group. Any sober look at today's American culture in general, the primary source of our received notions about other people, would reveal that disdain for racial minorities continues to be the strongest for black people. Actually, common white notions of American Indians are also largely ingested from current cultural imagery, from brave or noble team mascots to continued predominance of TV and movie images of long-gone Indians over accurate representations of the remaining ones actually living today. As Gwen notes in the sociological images post on this anachronistic tendency in non-indigenous appreciation of Indian art. This tendency is apparent in other elements of U.S. culture, of course. Movies like Dances with Wolves, books about noble savages, and conflicts over what types of technologies American Indians can use when spear fishing with non-Indians, arguing Indians should only be able to use the methods that their tribes used in the 1800s. All indicate a wider perception that quote-unquote authentic Indians should inhabit a time-warp universe in which their cultures and lifestyles have remained basically unchanged since the late 1800s or early 1900s, a requirement we don't ask of other groups.
Last but least, as far as I know, no one in my family has taken a DNA test to settle the question of whether we actually have Native American ancestry. If some of my relatives do decide to do it, I hope I get a chance to talk to them about just what it is they're really looking for. I'd also like to know what they plan to do if they find something else. And I thought this article was good. The reason why I chose to read this article, because it points out, as he called it, he called these white folks, he called them the ones who so badly want to be a part of the Indian heritage. He called them pretendians. I thought that was very well put together. Pretendians. And he also, if you were paying attention to my queen doing her best she could to read this article, you'll see that he also mentioned how white people romanticize. He's talking about the influence of movies, how movies have influenced white folks to romanticize. And he also mentioned one of the most important things, that they want Indian heritage to get access to federal funds, money. You know, the casinos and all that thing, all of that. You know, we must realize that the white man does everything in his power, anything possible in which he's created this this country in which we live in today. The access that he's created, the political access, the educational access, the things that he's created to make things easier for him or her, white folks, i.e. white people, to manipulate everything else for us so that they are always on top. We must be mindful of that, okay? And a lot of times people have they going on in their day-to-day lives, doing the best they can to live. That's not in their mind. That's not in, black people don't have that in their mindset. They're too busy trying to pay their bills. They're too busy trying to get an education. They're too busy trying to go to work to keep in mind that, you know what, this white person, I can't trust this white person. We've become too friendly with those who are really our enemies, to be real and be honest with you about it, to be raw and uncut. So on that note, in reference to what my queen has just read, I have an audio cast that I really, really, really want to play. Now, the reason why I'm going to play this audio cast is it explains why a lot of black people don't know their own native heritage. I want to also point out something that a post that I was having with somebody on Google just this past week. And in reference to the post, I was explaining how the movie Roots is a fabricated story. There's no truth in the story. Alex Haley did not write about his ancestors. That whole story that he put together in a novel called Roots was a fabricated lie. And he was sued by another white man and sued for over $500,000 in reference to the plagiarized story, because most of the story was stolen from a book called The African. People, go do your research. Okay, you'll find the same thing. Alex Haley settled out of court and gave this white man over $500,000 because he admitted that he plagiarized the story. So in reference to that, I was pointing out to somebody that why is it black folks have no memory or no oral tradition in our families of African identity? Well, the movie Roots was based. Let me finish what I'm saying. And I'm gonna let anybody here has anything to say what I'm saying. I'm gonna let you comment. So I'm muting you for a minute. So let me say this. We have oral traditions of Native American identity in our family, but we don't have any African oral tradition. But that's what the movie Roots was about. The movie Roots was about, even though it was a fabricated story, there's a point to be made in the movie, and this is the point. The movie was about keeping Kunta's identity alive so that his family would know that he came from Africa. That's why when he had his baby, he made sure his daughter, which I believe her name was Kizzy, he made sure that she knew who he was and where he came from so that she would know that she was part African. And she continued the tradition to keep their story alive, that her father and grandfather and great-grandfather and so forth down the Roots story, that their ancestor came from Africa. Now, I would think that any African who was brought here as a slave would do that, because wiping an African's identity, cultural identity, taking away his name, taking away his language, taking away his religious practices and his customs, has nothing to do with knowing the fact that he's in an alien land. Has nothing to do with the fact of knowing that he or she is in an alien country, and that they will perpetuate to their family and their descendants that, look, this is where you're from. So the movie made sense from that aspect. But we got so many slaves today in this country, black folks who are mental slaves who do not question the movie from that perspective. Yet, when you look at the black family today and generations back, there is no oral tradition of African identity in the family. You ask the average black family, you know anybody in your family from Africa? They're going to tell you no. You ask the average black woman and black man in America, do you know anybody in your family, uncle, aunt, cousin, grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, do you know anybody in your family who is African from Africa in your family? They're going to tell you no. But if you ask a black person, is there any Native American in you? They're going to tell you yes. Well, who? My grandmother or my great-grandmother, my auntie, my mama. They're going to tell you yes. Why do we have such a strong, deep, oral tradition of Native American identity in the black family? I'm going to tell you why. Because we are black Native Americans. We are the descendants of black Native Americans. And we need to stop lying to ourselves. We need to stop accepting the lie that was told and fed to us and fed to our parents. On that note, let me play this audio cast I'm going to play, and we will continue to verberate from here.
Virtually none of Thanksgiving has an ounce of accuracy, notes the bestseller Lies My Teacher Told Me. The idea of Europe bringing civilization to the Americas simply flips truth on its head. This is what European explorers actually found in North America.
Far and away the most beautiful city on earth. 5 times the size of London or Rome. Great towers and buildings rising from the water. 60,000 gleaming houses, and how spacious and how well built they were. Of beautiful stonework and cedarwood, and the wood of other sweet-scented trees. The many streets and boulevards of the city were so neat and well swept, despite the multitude of inhabitants, crisscrossed with a complex network of canals, like an enormous Venice, but also remarkable floating gardens that reminded of nowhere else on earth.
While Europe was drinking water from its polluted city rivers, huge aqueducts transported America's water from fresh springs.
But what impressed most were the special merchant areas where timber and tiles and other building materials were bought and sold, as well as greengrocer streets where one could buy every sort of vegetable, fruits, honeys, nut paste and chocolates. Astonished by the personal cleanliness and hygiene of the colourfully dressed populace, and by their extravagant use of soaps, deodorants and breath sweeteners.
Most Europeans never bathed and kept clothes on at all times. The Pilgrim's Notes biographer Zini Feiner had a terrible smell. Indians tried, quote, without success to teach them to bathe. The settlers also had bad breath from rotting teeth. Death and starvation was so common that corpses were just dumped in open pits known as poreholes. Many turned to alcohol and committed suicide. In fact, the story of the first settlers has been deliberately changed, notes author James Lowen, because the truth is so shameful. They actually settled hundreds of miles further south and stayed in America because the mission was a failure. Their real aim, reports historian Robert Beverly, was to find some gold and take it back to Europe.
They spent their days digging random holes in the ground, haplessly looking for gold, instead of planting crops. Soon they were starving and digging up putrid Indian corpses to eat. They took some Indian prisoners and forced them to teach the colonists how to farm.
And the meal with the natives wasn't quite the Thanksgiving shown on TV and in school books.
The colonists offered the Indians a toast to eternal friendship, whereupon the chief, his family, advisors, and 200 followers dropped dead of poison.
In mainstream history books, perhaps the most common description of American territory then is virgin land. In fact, notes historian Peter Jennings, it was widowed. Horrific enough, the Nazi ethnic cleansings in Europe during World War II. Leading American studies professor David Stannard notes it's dwarfed by, quote, far and away the most massive act of genocide in the history of the world. The death of 100 million indigenous people in the, quote, American Holocaust. Some from disease, but also vast numbers from a deliberate policy aimed at wiping out the race that mainstream history books continue to pretend never happened. He knows when Heinrich Himmler called the final solution, quote, delousing, Himmler was only echoing the Pilgrim Army's rallying cry, nits make lice, nits being Indian babies. This was a map of Indian nations across the US. 80% of the first government's entire budget went on attacking existing Indian settlements to take their developed farmland. The settlers would most probably not have survived, writes Jennings, on their own. 95% of America's entire population was then wiped out. American Holocaust notes there is documented evidence of colonist leaders going town after town, deliberately killing all men, women and children. Yet school texts and history books remain silent. Orders came from the very top. Under the direct order of George Washington, at least 28 of 30 Seneca towns and all the towns of the Mohawk, Onondaga and Cayuga were simply obliterated. George Washington wrote, the Indian country, quote, must be destroyed. Thomas Jefferson called to, quote, pursue Indians to extermination. Nobel Peace Prize winner Theodore Roosevelt called beneficial the eradication of the native race. Stannard notes genocide was official public policy. California Governor Peter Burnett in his 1851 message to the legislature.
Extermination must continue to be waged until the Indian becomes extinct.
Another governor issued the public proclamation to, quote, pursue, kill and destroy all Indians. A witness notes the ensuing bloodbaths practically wiped out the native race.
The whites shoot them down like wolves, men, women and children, wherever they could find them. This war of extermination against the Aborigines is tending to the final extinction of the race.
What reportedly saved the race from extinction was their use as slave labor.
This extermination policy has proved so injurious to the interests of the whites. Indian labor is indispensable.
There you go. You heard it. What he claimed saved the race was slavery, slavery of the Indian. And that's the part of history that the white devil leaves out. From 1501 to 1626. And I say 1626 because Africans were not brought here as slaves until 1626. Prior to 1626, we have over 100 years of Native American slavery. Now, even after Africans were brought here, not that many were brought here. The reason why not that many were brought here is because it was expensive for the white men to pay for Africans. And an African cost anywhere from $150 to $200 to $300 a body. They saw it much cheaper to purchase from slave hunters, Native American women and Native American men. Not only that, every time the white men had a war, and there were many wars across this country during that time period of the 17th and 16th century, many wars across this country, they were taking the prisoners of wars and enslaving them on plantations. The first ones to do this were the Spanish during the 1500s. This is the part of the history that the white devil don't want us to know about because it leads to who we are. So, if you were listening to this audio cast I just played, also something that's very important that I want to point out is how they lie to us about the intelligence, the intuitiveness, the agricultural intelligence, the intelligence of building and creating a civilized community of the Native American people. The audio cast starts out with him telling you what Cortez and these Spanish explorers saw. They saw cities. They saw thriving communities. They saw business, native people working together in business, clean, dressed, looking good, smelling good. They were astonished. It looked like nothing they had never seen before, because at the time, obviously, the white folks in Europe, they stanky towns looked stanky. They had a terrible sewage system. Yet they want to blame the Black Plague on rats. And, I personally think the Black Plague came from them nasty white folks who couldn't clean themselves and throwing their sewage out of the damn windows from which they in the very communities in which they lived. So let me open up the table. If anybody got anything you want to say, I just opened up the conference room. If anybody got anything anybody want to comment on, if you just want to continue to listen, please do. Queen, you got anything you want to add to what we before I go to the next audio cast, Queen?
That little bit right there, just showing you how they hid a lot of that history, the richness of the lands, the books, the knowledge that they had, and decided that never happened. Their picture was going to happen, like we've always said, and they say themselves that the conqueror writes the story. That's why it's called his story.
Yeah, and this white devil continues to do so. Anybody else want to comment on before I go to the next audio cast? Go ahead.
Yeah, I got something I'd like to say that I read.
Go ahead.
It's like a small article called "Preferring Fantasy Over Science," and it says something to ponder as you read these pages. We know of no source which insists Native Americans were exclusively the Mongol mulatto we know so well, like Geronimo and the like, except American television and movies. All other sources, like period artifacts and scientific studies, clearly show that blacks were the major component of Paleo-American demographic. Yet we see supposedly serious people, even some with a scholastic background, blow off these truths to cling to the Hollywood fantasy of Tonto. That is where the term albino in denial comes from. It is not easy to see the lies which formed your reality crumble before your eyes. Even some Negroes have the problem, too. Their reality has been shaped by the lies of the albinos, what the albinos taught them. So they, too, find it hard to grapple with the truth. May they all one day find the strength to accept the truth.
Wow. What's the name of that article, and where did you get it from?
The article is called "Preferring Fantasy Over Science," and it's on realhistoryww.com.
Go ahead, boy. Is this my nephew, right? Lamar, man, go ahead, brother. I really appreciate you reading that article. That was very, very, very good. Queen, you got anything to say about that?
Well, that's reality. I mean, people are choosing to believe the fantasy over the truth because it's just easier to accept.
And that kind of reminds me of when I was pointing out the big lie, which has been coined by Adolf Hitler in his book Mein Kampf, called The Big Lie, basically saying that people will rather believe the big lie than the truth. And if you say it enough and you repeat it enough and you make it a repetitive thing, eventually it'll become an accepted fact, even though it's a lie, right, Queen?
That's true. That is so true.
And that's what's happened here in America when it comes to the black Native American.
Yeah, because, I mean, as we listen to the audio cast from the book, Lies My Teacher Never Told, or was it?
Lies My Teacher Told Me?
Yeah. That the basic example is they stopped the genocidal war just to indoctrinate slavery because it was easier for them. So they didn't have to build, they didn't have to farm. They took the survivors of their wars and battles and put them into slavery, the indigenous people.
And also the fact that they don't tell the truth about what the word genocide really means. Mm-hmm. I mean, they got everybody thinking when they hear the word genocide, they think that
complete death annihilation.
Exactly. That there's a physical extermination of a people. I'm going to read it right here. The concept of genocide was formulated by Raphael Lemkin. Mm-hmm. I'm going to read it again right here. I want you to know, if you go look this up, this terminology and this true definition of genocide you won't find in a lot of places, because the white devil Jew has made sure that his history falls under that terminology, genocide, when that's not what the word genocide was coined after or for when it was formulated by Raphael Lemkin. As it reads right here, he saw this genocide as a two-stage process. Well, let me mute my people in the conference room. I'm getting back feedback right here, so let me finish reading here. He saw this genocide as a two-stage process, the first being the destruction of the indigenous population's way of life. In the second stage, the newcomers impose their way of life on the minority group. According to David Mayberry Lewis, imperial and colonial forms of genocide are enacted in two main ways: either through deliberate clearing of territories of their original inhabitants in order to make the exploitable for the purpose of deliberate clearing of territories of their original inhabitants in order to make them exploitable for the purpose of resources extraction or colonial settlements, or through enlisting the indigenous people as forced labor in colonial and imperial projects of resources and extraction. And it's, in other words, slavery. You know, he says, and I just find it quite odd when you read it, says through enlisting. You hear the Queen?
Yeah.
How he said enlisting through
how
they white devils
around enslavement.
When he could have just
labor is the same thing as enslavement.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, you're enlisted. It's an involuntary enlisting, kind of like how the draft was. You were drafted to be a slave.
Wow. Like I said, he's great. But you know what? My point, the good point that I'm going to make is like how most people don't pay attention and don't read and don't research and realize. And the white man tries to change information as he writes stuff, and he tries to rewrite things because he's concerned about people knowing. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is key. And the white devil knows this. He just don't want us knowing this. And, you know, I'm really marked for time, as my queen let me know the time is going. I got a lot of more information. I might just have to do a second podcast on this subject matter right here. But before I do that, I must play this last audio cast. If I go a little bit over, then so be it. But I must play this audio cast because I had a sister ask me, a sister on Google asked me, and a brother asked me, if what I'm saying is true, if black people in America are black Native Americans, and that we should actually not be calling ourselves African American. We're giving away our birthright to this country. We're giving away our ancestral connection to this country. We're giving away our cultural heritage to the white devil when we claim African American. Now we're claiming we're from somewhere else when we're actually from here. White devil knows what he's doing. So she said, I had a person ask me, well, if that's the case, then why wasn't this information shared and disseminated in the family through our native ancestors, those who knew who they were? Well, let me play an audio cast that's going to answer this. Now, I'm probably going to have to continue this subject matter to next week, the next Black Delicious Black Sunday, but I will do so in a part 2 because this audio cast is going to lead to some history on, you'll see. Let me play this right quick and we will continue before this show is over. Wrong audio cast. That was not the audio cast I wanted to play. Oh, wow. The one I wanted to upload, I didn't upload the one I wanted to play. Oh, my goodness. I'm going to have to play it next week. Oh, my goodness. It's okay. Then I'll just play it next week. So I thought this audio cast that I wanted to play was about the audio cast I was going to play is about a man by the name of Walter Ashby Plecker. And his name, he went by Dr. Walter Ashby Plecker. He was around during the 18th century, during the 1800s. And this man was the head of the vital statistics department in Virginia. And his plan was he made sure that all documentation of black Native American people was destroyed. And he made sure that any Native American baby that was born, that that the word Native American, that anything that was tied to their identity was taken off of their birth records, taking off of any marriage records. This white devil did this, Mr. Plecker. He was a white supremacist. He was a eugenics white supremacist as well. He was also a part of the eugenics group, and he definitely had an agenda to wipe out the identity of black Native Americans in this country. Matter of fact, this article right here, I'm not sure if you got it up, Queen. I can at least read this article.
Okay.
But it's called Black and White World of Walter Ashby Plecker. You see it? Please read that.
Says The Black and White World of Walter Ashby Plecker by Warren Fisk, the Virginia pilot, August 18th, 2004. Lacey Brenham Harrell closes her eyes and travels 8 decades back to what began as a sweet childhood. There was family everywhere. Her parents, 5 siblings, 9 sets of adoring aunts and uncles, and more cousins than she could count. They all lived in a Monacan Indian settlement near Amherst. Their threadbare homes circling apple orchards at the foot of Tobacco Row Mountain. As Harold grew, however, she sensed the adults were engulfed in deepening despair. When she was 12, an uncle gathered his family and left Virginia, never to see her again. Other relatives scattered in rapid succession, some muttering the name Plecker. Soon, only Harold's immediate family remained. Then the orchards began to close because there was not enough workers, and the townspeople turned their backs, and all that was left was prejudice and plight and Plecker. Harold shakes her head sadly. I thought Plecker was a devil, she says. Still do. Walter Ashby Plecker was the first registrar of Virginia's Bureau of Vital Statistics, which records births, marriages, and deaths. He accepted the job in 1912. For the next 34 years, he led the effort to purify the white race in Virginia by forcing Indians and other non-whites to classify themselves as blacks. It amounted to bureaucratic genocide. Plecker was a white supremacist and a zealous advocate of eugenics, a now discredited movement to preserve the integrity of white blood by preventing interracial breeding. Unless this can be done, he once wrote, we have little to hope for, but may expect in the future decline or complete destruction of our civilization. Plecker's icy efficiency as racial gatekeeper drew international attention, including that of Nazi Germany. In 1943, he boasted, Hitler's genocidal studies of the Jews is not more complete. Plecker retired in 1946 at the age of 85 and died the following year. The damage lives on. From the grave, Plecker is frustrating the efforts of Virginia tribes to win federal recognition and a trove of accompanying grants for housing, healthcare, and education. One of the requirements is that the tribes prove their continuous existence since 1900. Plecker, by purging Indians as a race, has made that nearly impossible. 6 Virginia tribes are seeking the permission of Congress to bypass the requirement. It never seems to end with this guy, said Kenneth Adams, chief of the Upper Mattapony. You wonder how anyone could be so consumed with hate. It's likely that Plecker didn't see himself as the least bit hateful. He had not been so personally aloof. He might have explained that he believed he was practicing good science and religion. Perhaps he would have acknowledged that he was influenced by his own heritage. Walter Plecker was one of the last sons of the Old South. He was born in Augusta County in April 2, 1861. 10 days later, the cannons at Fort Sumter sounded the start of the Civil War. His father, a prosperous merchant and slave owner, left home to fight for the Confederate Army with many of his kin. Some 60 years later, Plecker would recall his early days in a letter to a magazine editor expressing his abhorrence for interracial breeding. He remembered being largely under the control of a faithful slave named Delia. When the war ended, she stayed on as a servant. The Pleckers were so fond of her that they let her get married in their house. When Plecker's mother died in 1915, it was Delia who closed her eyes, he wrote. Then Plecker got to his point. As much as we held and esteemed individual Negroes, this esteem was not a character that would tolerate marriage with them. Though, as we know now, to our sorrow, much illegitimate mixture has occurred. Plecker added, if you desire to do the correct thing for the Negro race, inspire them with the thought that the birth of mulatto children is a standing disgrace. Plecker graduated from Hoover Military Academy in Staunton in 1880. He became a doctor, graduated from the University of Maryland's Medical School in 1885. He moved around West Virginia and the gold fields of Alabama before settling in Hampton in 1892. Plecker took special interest in delivering babies. He became concerned about the high mortality rate among poor mothers and began keeping records and searching for ways to improve birthing. Public health was first being recognized as a government concern at the turn of the last century, and Plecker was a pioneer. In 1902, he became health officer for Elizabeth City County, today Hampton. He recorded details of more than 98% of the births and deaths in the county, an amazing feat during the time when most people were born and died at home. When lawmakers established the State Bureau of Vital Statistics in 1912, they asked Plecker to run it.
All right, stop right there. I'm going to end my podcast, and we will continue this podcast subject next Delicious Black Sunday, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut here on the Black Village Community Podcast. This is an important subject matter to me. I'm gonna let everybody know, and I've said it before, I am a truth seeker. And I started out black conscious. I'm still black conscious, but black consciousness has nothing to do with one embracing something that's not truth. I'm a truth seeker, and black consciousness is about truth. And we need to recognize and accept that the indigenous Indian, the indigenous Aboriginal people of this country, the native people of this country were a black people. Blackness is not located and just stationized in Africa alone. You have black people all over this world. The Fijian people of Fiji, the people of India, the Aboriginal people of Australia, they are black people. And the indigenous Aboriginal people of America were and is black people. We got to stop being slaves to this system, people. We got to stop allowing the white devil to tell us what truth is. We must define truth through our cultural principles, through our heart and our soul and our spirit as our ancestors and the great mother speaks to us. Stop following the white devil. And so I end my show on that note. Let me also see if my nephew, if anybody got anything they might want to say before the show is over. Anybody, any comments? Anybody might want to say anything before I shut down things here at the village here? I just unmuted anybody. If they got any comments they might want to say before we go.
I would research it for people that don't know.
Okay, go out. Somebody else I heard you, nephew. Somebody else was saying something as well, brother. 916-633-8711. Excuse me, I shouldn't even said that like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Who this might be? This is Brother Currington.
1 minute. Hello?
Is that Brother Currington?
Yes, it is.
What's happening, my brother?
Well, I got in late on the show. I fell asleep. But, you know, you really showing how this man has really pulled the wool, using an old phrase, over the eyes of the world. It's not just over black folks themselves here in America, but it's the world. Because everybody's fooled about this whole slavery thing.
Exactly.
You know,
and you know what? I got a lot more information about Mr. Plecker I want to share, and I don't have the time now to do so because I'll be taking up too much time. I'm only supposed to go an hour, but I'm gonna share the next week. I got more information how this man influenced Congress. He was trying to pass a law in Congress. And that law was called the Act excuse me, what was it? That law was called, let me see, I got the information right here. The law was called the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. Okay? And he couldn't get the law to pass in essence where it would be a law throughout the United States, but he did get a lot of states to accept the law. His state being one of Virginia was one of the states that accepted the law. And so, and as a result of Virginia accepting the law and making it a law in their state, other states followed suit. And so and not only that, he was also behind another law that was passed called the Act to Provide for Sexual Sterilization of Inmates and of the state of institution in certain cases. That wording right there is very meticulous because it wasn't only prison inmates they were sterilizing. That's why it says the Act to Provide for Sexual Sterilization of Inmates of States in certain cases, henceforth referred to as the Sterilization Act, because you had doctors that were sterilizing black women all across this country, women who didn't even know they were being sterilized, not just women in prison, but women in hospitals. And it's because of this white devil, Mr. Plecker. He was behind that. Okay, and so yeah, I got more information I'm going to share, and it explains a whole lot, because him being the head of the Vital Statistics Office, which meant he had access to birth records, marriage certificates, and anything that proved one's identity. He had access to those records, and he was destroying information. He was rewriting information, rearranging information, and relabeling people and renaming people. And actually, he made sure that all Native Americans were called Black and Negro on their paperwork.
If they were dark-skinned?
If they were dark-skinned Native Americans. And so this subject matter is very important, my brother. So I appreciate you listening. I appreciate my nephew joining me on the show as well. Anything else you want to share, nephew?
Not just for people that don't know who they are, that call themselves African Americans, that don't really know where their people come from, to do your research.
Okay, I appreciate my family who joined me on the show. I appreciate everybody who's listening to this show. I would always encourage my people, please research, please ask questions, never stop asking questions, never stop raising questions. Queen, you got anything else you want to say before we go?
Normally I would tell everybody to of course, to stay united and to continue to learn and to grow. If you really want to know who your ancestrals are, you ask your family, those you know. Get in touch with those who do know and go beyond that, because your history is there. It is now down to an oral tradition, as it's always been, and it is up to us to find out the truth of who we are through our family.
I concur with my queen has just said. And as always, we will be back. We will be black. And also, like as I said before, my theme music will be changing from the African village. It will be changing to the black village. It is being currently worked on, even as I speak. And so it's taking time. So bear with me on that. It's taking time because I want to have the perfect music for my show. So it's going to take some time. But my theme music will be changing. My title has already changed to the Black Village Community Podcast. And on that note, I will be back and I will be black. You can always join me here at the Black Village Community Podcast every Sunday from 3 to 4 p.m. Sometimes I go a little bit over depending on the information that I am sharing with the community. But you can always join me here toll free. Won't cost you a dime. Just a bit of your conscious time. 855-445-9340. You can also join me at 857-232-0155. Conference code 947595. And I will be back. And as always, as I always say, may the Great Mother bring us together in the love and unity of her peace. And as I always say, I love chicken, so love, peace, and chicken grease. I'm out of here.
Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people.
Aboriginal means the original inhabitant of a land from the earliest times. The ancient mound builders that built and designed line, the pyramids right here. Not just by the Nile, contrary to popular belief and denial. Pyramids and huge hieroglyphics and pictographs on the ground are all mounds found around the Americas, north, central, and south. Even Venus and Mars, that is documented fact that emanates from my mouth. So who exactly were these aboriginals here? Whose ancient evidence of residency is hesitantly mentioned in this hemisphere? Were they the stereotypical Native American so-called Red Indians? Well then, let's be clear, ask India, their tribe, if they're sincere, they'll tell ya those mounds predate their origins. Our past was erased and replaced with lies. Our achievements and identity plagiarized. We got amnesia of who we are, but we go way back further than the seats in your car.
Aboriginal people, 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 Aboriginal people.
No matter where you go in every country, we in there. Most of us did not come on slave ships, we've been here. Indian just means amalgamated more. The U.S. tried to wipe us out in 3 seminal wars. For each Aboriginal, 7 troops died. 90% of Indians were reclassified as Negroes. We fought European foes. Africa's great, but we don't look under our nose. Or now here's the Old Man River, or the Maasai Sequel, knock out the Mississippi. We're the Yamasee people and others here like the Washita, the Chocos in Colombia, Dariendes in Panama, the Garifunas and more. We're prisoners of war. Our titles, nationalities, and birthrights ignored. We got a huge missing gap in our past and been divided into race and some type of caste. Everyone else has a language, where's mine? Cause ours is long gone like your grandpa's hairline.
Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal people, Aboriginal